saying, I'm an urban sociologist and advisor at STIPO. I was recently appointed to be the director of Placemaking Europe, that our great leader, Elise Perrault, did a great job in representing us, and Frederick Lindstal is our board member. So just you've heard enough about that today already. But I'm also the community manager of STADmakersfonds, a revolving fund, the Netherlands' first revolving fund for civic-driven initiatives that I will be talking about today. But first, it helps a little bit for you guys to understand what we do as STIPO, because that's also where the initiative emerged from. So as STIPO, we work a lot for cities or real estate developers on processes that we improve the quality of public space. We work on area development, long-term strategies, and a lot about social issues in the city, so issues around inequality and equity. We do so along a series of core values that we always take into account when we start our project. That is, of course, the human skill of the city, which we will be talking about a lot today. Long-lasting quality instead of fast-paced development. The soul of the place, heritage is an important part of that. Mixed use and public value. And one of the more important things that will also inform the discussion of today is the issue of ownership, the idea of all the processes that we guide. We always work in co-makership with the city's users, entrepreneurs, developers, people working for the city, because we really believe that leads to the most sustainable solutions for urban development. And we ourselves are also an interdisciplinary team. So one of the projects that we've done the last couple of years is Zoho in Rotterdam, which used to be an office area that was vacant for a lot of years. And we came in and over time, by the use of the term slow urbanism, developed it into a maker district, filling 10,000 square meters of this yellow building with new tenants, lots of them creatives, also opening the facade to make way for the cafe that you see here, and changing this parking lot into first a test case of a rainproof garden, and later on into a sustainable climate-proof city park. And we've learned a lot from this project, but we also moved out of the area last year. Unfortunately, you could say, because the area was sold and it was being put up for more permanent development. But what we've done the last couple of years is that we've connected to a lot of like-minded projects across Europe through different networks that we run, which is the Recreators, a network of civic incubators around Europe, but also Placemaking Europe that was mentioned before. And we've learned a lot from looking at how other people are working. So one of our most inspiring projects that we've connected to is Holzmarkt in Berlin, which is a 18,000 square meters urban village that's being developed by a group of young creatives that includes affordable student and artist housing, a theater, a restaurant, music studios, but also a lot of public space and urban gardens for the city to use. And what we've learned from these amazing guys is to work on sustainable business models for placemaking, or city making in this case, because they were able to convince a Swiss pension fund to buy the land for them and lease it back to them for 99 years. But they've also managed to get about 100 private investors on board from their own network that all invested relatively low investments of 25,000 euros, but all in all, that provided enough of a solid income for the project to be pulled off. And what you see happening a lot in these civic-driven initiatives, as we call them, or city maker initiatives, is that there's a lot of financial innovation in these projects. They constantly reinvent the financial wheel, you could say, but very often, like the Holzmarkt initiative has been very lucky to work with Swiss pension fund, but very often it's a lack of the financial infrastructure to support these types of initiatives. And it has been mentioned before as well. So we'll probably get back to that. One of our board members, Joost Beunerman, who's from London, a 00 architect, he wrote a book about 12 years ago, it must be, about the civic economy that was emerging at the time in light of the economic crisis in London. And he interviewed 25 very, very interesting projects. And he precisely also identified this as a big challenge. It's often the systems that are not in place to support the civic economy as it is. And also, going back to many of the projects that he interviewed for the book originally, he found that many of these projects, they ran out if they weren't able ran out of energy if they weren't able to financially sustain their impact. Because what happens a lot is that people start a project in their own street or in their own city with a lot of passion. They work on it voluntarily, but over time, that something that I've faced from talking to many city makers around Europe. It's about 5 to 7 years that you can manage without being able to generate an income and at least have a lookout on a bit more sustainable income over time. So one of the solutions that we found, learning from the Zoho projects that I just presented, and maybe other mistakes that we made as city makers, is that every city maker needs a Theo. Theo is the founder of Stadsmakersfonds, which is a Dutch office for plan economists, and we met him in the course of working on the Zoho project, and he, basically pointed out our biggest mistakes as city makers. So he said, "Oh, you guys are crazy for working in the Zoho district, adding so much value by getting 10,000 square meters filled with new tenants, but the value of the building is measured by the amount of rental contracts." So at some point in the Zoho project, we were thinking as a community that we might want to buy the building to sustain their impact in the area, but then we did so after we filled the building with new tenants, which in the case of Theo, he pointed out was a big mistake. So what instead we started to do is collaborate with Theo as STIPO. So this is Hans Karsenberg, founder of STIPO, where I work for, and Theo, who basically had a dream together to come up with this new financial infrastructure that I was just mentioning that was lacking. Because very often these great initiatives, they are perceived as very valuable, but it's very risky for many banks to invest in these projects. And a lot of governments, they might give subsidies, but a more sustainable investment might be a big challenge, especially if they want to scale up. So what we did is we gathered a lot of knowledge, talked to like-minded foundations in Europe. One of them is the Trias Foundation. Edith Marion was one of them as well, and we learned a lot from them. And we were also lucky enough to be in a constant conversation with the province of Utrecht, which is a region in the Netherlands, and the Triodos Bank, which is an ethical bank that has a track record of investing in creative hubs where many other banks wouldn't. So together with these partners, we were able the province of Utrecht actually provided the first seed capital for the fund, the first $1 million, and the Triodos Bank provided a partnership in which we can multiply the fund. And because we all agree that for placemaking to positively impact the quality of our environment and communities, it needs to scale up, expand, and sustain, much of what Frederick was presenting before. And in order to do so, we need this new financial infrastructure. So that is also how the City Maker Fund came into being. This is an image from our website. It tells you to co-invest in an attractive city. To give you an idea of the types of initiatives that we work with at the moment, because the fund was recently launched, and since this year we're actually funding projects. This is the Hof van Cartesius, which is a project started by Charlot Ernst, Bianca Ernst, her sister, and Simone Tenda. And the last couple of years, in 4 years' time, they've been able to create a creative hub that offers affordable office space to young creatives from the city of Utrecht, but also provides a lot of public space, and it experiments with circular use of building material, and they even have a shop where you can buy a sustainable building material for your own projects. And in 4 years' time, they've actually been so successful that all of their office spaces were used, so they wanted to grow. And as the City Maker Fund, they wanted to triple in size. We've been able to help them buy the land for them to grow the community on, which they're actually building with circular materials at the moment. And another initiative that we're working towards funding at the moment is the Parkhuis in Amersfoort, another city in the province of Utrecht. This is an old hospital building, actually their boiler room, that they're transforming into a hub for meetings, for creatives and people working actually as city makers in the city to meet, but also it will house an inclusive daycare center for, basically everyone, but especially also focusing on children with disabilities, being inclusive to neighborhood projects that they want to host a platform for. And they are also adjacent to a resident developed neighborhood park. That's recent development. So what the Stadsmakersfonds, the City Maker Fund, does is that it guides city makers. So we help, especially Theo, helps these city makers to create more sustainable business cases. We are matchmakers. So at the moment we have seed capital, as said, from the province of Utrecht. But our next step is also getting private investors on board and growing the fund in order to be able to invest in more projects. And we also invest ourselves. So one of the things, it's not a subsidy that we give, it's really an investment. So it has to be paid back within 10 years time. But we do so for very low interest rates. So the trick is that people want to create their social impact, therefore not be too commercial. And that's also why regular loans generally not work. So that's why we do so with other interest rates. And we also aspire to grow. So at the moment, we're active in the province of Utrecht, as said, but we're talking to other regions and cities in the Netherlands to grow, hopefully very soon, into a national fund. And on the mid to long term, we hope to also grow or at least collaborate with like-minded funds in Europe to create that infrastructure on the European level, because that's originally where the idea came from our international networks. We felt that on the scale of Europe, at least, these infrastructures were lacking. So in that sense, our future dream is to have the European Investment Bank and other cities stepping on board of a Europe-wide fund. So I'll leave it for that now. Kiitos. And I hope to meet you at one moment live in Helsinki.
Hello, Charlot. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. And really like very, very exciting that you have been indeed doing it the way that we all apparently have to do real innovation. So first, so-called doing it the wrong way, and having the fortunate situation to have somebody like Theo. I was just told that you maybe didn't hear my beginning, but it doesn't matter. So I just thanked you, and was very, very, very important. Can you say a little bit about, like, just to give a background of like, you know, if somebody would now like to really to apply your ideas of around Stadsmakersfonds, this is a difficult question because it depends a bit how you relate to the structures in other countries. But are there some specific angles in the Netherlands that enable this, or do you think that this is something that could be more or less applied anywhere in Europe?
I think, well, the general idea that we have is that it can be applied everywhere. The reason that we started in the province of Utrecht is because precisely we want to be sure that we test the infrastructure first, abiding to all the legal and formal rules of the Netherlands first. But again, over time, I really believe that the mechanism is the same, and also the need for the mechanism is exactly the same in other countries. And I think it's relatively new that this is the revolving fund, because I think we've seen a lot that governments have been investing in terms of subsidies. But the idea is that then the fund is only spent once. So the public money is only spent once. And the idea of this fund is that these city makers, they have their own business cases, be it that they need 10 years to pay it back and not like a very quick equity fund or something like that. So, but then this makes way for many more projects to be funded. So I think that is something that would be of help in many more places. And I think especially seeing, well, like the how do you say that in English? But the interest becoming lower on bank savings around, well, yeah, the world, I would say. We also feel that for private people who would like to make impact with their money, it's something that's a very valuable way of spending it. So yeah, we definitely see the potential to grow the fund.
Yeah, something that comes very much from here as a question is that how does this relate to, in a way, to certain structures that have to do with, for example, crowdfunding, and then maybe participatory budgeting? Where would you place this as an approach compared to those?
Well, I think it's complementary to at least participatory budgeting. So the idea of participatory budgeting is, of course, again, that it's a fund that's being freed to do resident or community-driven initiatives generally, or the city decides together on where the public money will be spent. The trick here again is that it's invested, that it helps city makers buy their own property and real estate and also sustain their role in area development over time, which in the case of participatory budgeting is not always the same. And then crowdfunding is definitely something that to include in the City Maker Fund, because it's a super potential mechanism. But on the other hand, it's also generally people crowdfund something for €1,000 or something like that. In order to be able to buy your real estate or your land, you generally need quite a big sum of money. So we've started with the seed capital in the way that we've done so, but over time, we're definitely looking to include crowdfunding as a mechanism as well. Whether crowdfunding in itself for smaller amounts would ever be feasible for such large scale projects, I'm not entirely sure, but well, potentially yes.
If you think about if somebody now, like I'm sure, gets very excited about what you have just told about Stadsmakersfonds and thinks that this is a model that would be somehow fantastic, and we don't have perhaps have a similar kind of party like STIPO with especially a person like Theo on board. So can this start from some other kind of organization? Could this be something that, for example, the city would initiate? Is it possible, or does it become too unclear what it's really about and who is really in charge of the process?
That's a very relevant question, and also something that we've faced when we were setting up the fund in the Netherlands. Well, the reason that we did it as its own legal form and also with an independent board that is actually on the steering committee, of course, and also a council of advisors, is that for example, for the province, it might be too risky to assess and evaluate themselves and also be on board of a revolving fund as such. So the reason that we set up the fund as an independent mechanism, and also because we want to grow eventually to other provinces, makes that there are reasons that it might be wiser to do it as a separate legal entity, like accountability and transparency in also communicating your decision-making processes. Of course, it would be possible for cities also to set up something similar, but then again, it has to be assessed with the legal capabilities of the city, if that's something that they can invest in as a clear problem.
Right. And it's a question also of if it is equal, so-called. So is it possible for everybody? What are your personal hopes that the Stadsmakersfonds now will enable that is up and running? So how do you see? What are you expecting? What kind of initiative will it stimulate?
Well, I think what I really like about this project, because this fund, is that I said before, like in my previous capacity as well, before joining the STIPO team, I've talked to hundreds of city makers all over Europe who are always facing the similar idea of having a lot of passion in the beginning and then burning out because they can't sustain or they have to move because they were only a temporary project. And that it's mostly at the moment that they also lost their hearts to a location, a place, and they would love to continue investing in it. So if we are able to have these types of city makers, civic-driven initiatives all over Europe at some point, having a larger stake in the value that they create, because I think that's that's the mechanism, and also making sure that areas that we develop now remain interesting, because what often happens is that these initiatives are given a temporary space to sort of place make the area. But then again, they create a lot of value that sometimes is being shifted to another area, and then the normal area development is happening, and all of a sudden all the energy goes out of the area and we have a dull residential area. So these types of mechanisms is of course what the City Maker Fund is trying to tap into. So I'm really hoping that this will become a mechanism for at least the Netherlands, hopefully internationally at some point, as soon as we can start talking to cities or regions who are interested, that helps create better places and areas and also allows people to have larger ownership over these processes.